All right, are we live? I think we've got some participants in the chat room. I'll look for a thumbs up from you, Jeremy, when it's time to get going. Welcome, everybody, though, those of you on Zoom. Appreciate you taking time. I'm Henry. Thanks for signing in. But we got to wait for our Facebook friends, so just don't discriminate against them. I know we'll be receiving your comments too through the Facebook channels as well. All due respect to Zuckerberg et al. All right, we'll hang here for one more sec. Yeah, just bear with us. All right, hang tough, everybody. 1 minute. Let me look in our participant room too, though, see who all's here. I know we've got a lot of attendees there too. Oh, nice. Didn't see Heather Michaels. Alice McCain, hi. Oh, Jody. Hello, Jody Cooper. Denise Knitter, those of you who don't know her, works in my office. She's amazing. Hi, Leah. Nice to see you, Alina Hertzberg. Lisa Lehner Fagan, nice to see you, and Malky. Okay,
we are live.
Thumbs up. I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm Henry Stern. I work for a lot of you in the San Fernando Valley. I appreciate you signing in for a check-in here in a town hall. We've got some amazing partners joining us today, and I thought, I've been talking to so many of you guys about so many different issues facing us in Encino specifically, but really in the Valley. I didn't want to just do a West Valley, throw everyone into one big bucket and, you know, check the box, but really try to have a format here that's informal, iterative, a place for you guys also to vent a little bit. It's an incredibly frustrating time, and it's a hard time to live in Encino. We have a very special and beautiful and, you know, historic community, but if you're a parent out there stuck on Zoom all day with your kids, or if you're working and you're out of a job, or if you're worried about the homelessness epidemic, or if you're just trying to like walk in the morning to get a cup of coffee, or if you care about the environment and our wildlife, it still is trying to hang on for dear life, or wildfires that it seems to keep coming after us year after year. The challenges abound. The housing influx and a big push on development is threatening to affect the complexion of our neighborhoods in significant ways. And there are good things happening too, but anyhow, I know it's hard sometimes, especially when you're dealing with like, who's your state senator? What is a state senator even? Here I am, I work for you. So if we haven't met yet, I'm sorry. But I hope today was just a chance to let some of our community leaders really help facilitate a conversation. I wish I could be with you guys in person, but we really want to focus on a few issue areas, but don't worry, it's not, we don't want to be too rigid either here. We were trying to focus on what a safe and livable Encino could look like. And that's got some environmental factors that has to do with public safety, that has to do with housing, that has to do with homelessness, but there's other issues too. So feel free to chime in over the chat function. Those of you who already sent questions, thank you. Jeremy Wolf and Megan Meckelberg and Denise Knitter on my team have been just amazing. So I sincerely appreciate their work in throwing this together quickly. And without further ado, I wanted to, I guess I'll start off just by outlining some of the folks who are in our sort of Zoom panel here, and then I'll start with Alex. But we have some of our foremost environmental and conservation voices here, between Muriel Cotton and Pat Bates, talking about some issues in the Sepulveda Basin. Some of our most educated in bureaucracy, homeowners issues, and sort of neighborhood integrity issues with Janie Thompson and Rob Glushon, who are with Encino Property Owners Association, and now Amistoy's got a HOA going. Ken Kraft, who's here with Hope of the Valley. He's the president and CEO, as well as I think Claudia Kuchek is here, who is at one of my favorite schools and truly a leader in education statewide with Westmark. And then Alex, who you're going to start us off here, native boy of the Valley, actually Argentine by origin, but really grew up and are this community. I got to thank you, Alex, for your leadership, getting this Encino Neighborhood Council inspired at a time when so many people are fractured and most people just yell at each other on the internet, and politics seems like a terrible place to be. And I just, what you're doing, putting some infrastructure together civically here for people to actually get their voices heard is so big. So Alex, I'll let you kick it off, and then he's going to give us a quick short overview of some speakers and topics, and then we'll get into it.
Thank you so much, Senator Stern. It's good to see you. It's good to see everybody, all my friends that are on here, Janie and Rob and Muriel, Pat, who I just admire so much, and Claudia, who I look forward to working with you soon, and everyone who's attending. My name is Alex Gray. I am the president of the Encino Neighborhood Council, and I really hope that by now everybody knows about the Encino Neighborhood Council, but I'll touch on that in a few minutes because I really want to focus on what today is about, and we want to talk about some important issues. The basin, which is a huge concern, I hope, not just to me, but to everybody, especially with the fires that have been happening over the past several months. Homelessness, which is, I hope we can all agree that there is an issue with homelessness, and we can have an honest conversation about the steps that we need to take to mitigate it, and to hopefully one day have a solution that fits everybody. And I know that's a very difficult thing to say because homelessness is not just a one descriptive word. There's so many different layers to homelessness that we really need to focus on the different challenges that each person in those different layers is affected by. And I know for the basin, Muriel, you're going to talk about it. Muriel has been such an unbelievable treasure to the basin. She has fought so hard for it and is fighting so hard after the devastating fires. And Ken Kraft, who I don't know how you do what you do, sir, President and CEO of Hope of the Valley. It is at times, I can only imagine how frustrating and defeating what you are attempting to do, but you do it every day and you keep on fighting. And I've been saying lately that the only guarantee, or one of the few guarantees that will never happen, is the fight that you don't take on. So I am so happy that you continue to take that fight. And I know Pat, who has introduced me to so much wildlife and so many different species of trees, and I always refer to this one, it's one of my favorite, the cork oak in the basin, that I never would have known it other than just an oak tree. But Pat is such a treasure, and it's been such a pleasure to work with her over the past several years on the Neighborhood Council that I am deeply grateful for. And to the Senator, who is taking on some amazing topics and making such changes and leaving footprints for my kids and one day grandkids to have a safe and amazing California to live in. And I hope we can all move forward with these changes and have a great conversation. I'm just gonna give you guys a quick, very short update on what the Neighborhood Council is doing. Obviously, we take on a lot of local issues, from traffic, that's the cut-through traffic that affects so many of us, especially on the hillside, but even down in the flats, including my street, that people continuously speed down to get through. Homelessness, we're not scared of tackling any issue when it comes to homelessness. I know the community has expressed how our streets are a little bit dirtier, so I hope we can touch on that. I also hope we can talk about making Encino a little bit safer and a little bit more walkable or bike-friendly in the future, so we can get out and exercise. As we all learned from COVID, it's good to get out and walk, and I hope we've all been doing that. I'm just going to keep this short. I have got two little PSAs. One is about the census. Please, if you haven't filled it out, and I'm sure everybody listening has already filled it out, it is so important to the Neighborhood Council. It is important to the city. It affects our funding. It affects where resources are allocated. So if you haven't filled it out, it takes a few minutes. If you have friends or neighbors, please encourage them to fill it out. The second thing I want to say is vote, vote, vote. It is always important to vote, but this year more than ever, please vote. I grew up in the Valley. I was born in 1971. Those were interesting times to grow up, but I have never, ever in my life seen such a hated, divided society. We've always had division, but now it's hateful. If you don't see it my way, I don't even want to talk to you. And we need to sort of move forward from that, because we need to have honest conversations with people who have different beliefs. When we talk about homelessness, I hope if these were non-COVID times, we could stand arm in arm and all say, hey, we can all agree that there's an issue with homelessness, and we can take that first step forward. And as long as we keep talking and having open discussions, we can work together. But we have to come to a point where we can look at someone and say, you know something? It's okay for us to disagree on our political beliefs, on religious beliefs. We can still have open conversations, because that's how we learn from each other. So please vote, and not just on the big elections. Vote on the state bills. Those are important. Vote in the local elections for city council, and even for neighborhood councils. Our elections are coming up, 2021. Anybody who's interested in running, you'll be able to fill out a candidate application starting January 2nd. For Encino, our election's on May 4th. It is so important because we build relationships, not just as an advisory group to the council member. We built it with our assembly member. We built it with a senator. We built it on a federal level, because we have taken on the challenge of fighting the FAA for noise pollution coming out of Van Nuys and out of Burbank. And before I turn it back to the senator, I'm going to share with him the story of how I first met him. He probably forgot, because I know he meets a lot of people. But this was back in 2016 when he was candidate Stern. We met at the Taste of Encino. I was just new on the board, but I was the chair of the outreach committee. And he was gracious enough to take about 30 minutes and sit with my wife and daughter. We had a conversation about Fazio, because I had some inside info sort of a friend who used to deal with him. And he was so gracious. And I told him that day, you're going to win. Don't even worry. And he was humble, and he appreciated, but cautiously optimistic. And it has been my pleasure to see him grow into doing the things that he's doing for the wildlife, for homelessness, for even housing. And I'm deeply grateful that we've had this connection. And I also want to go on record as saying, working with Jeremy and Denise has been so easy, so smooth, and they are so responsive that if you could clone their enthusiasm and their energy, it would just make working with every city and state and federal elected office staff so easy. It is my pleasure to work with them, because I know I can bug Jeremy whenever I want, and he can do the same with me. So I am grateful, humbled, and appreciative of today, and I hope we can have. I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about some of the legislative updates coming out of Sacramento.
Okay, Alex. You never know who you're going to meet when you're going to the farmer's market. Just like being in a community, crazy things happen, and you become such a leader since then. And it turns out I'm actually friends with Steve Fazio now after all that. I really, you met my wife, and we had lunch together, and I kind of wish all campaigns shook out that way. And I see Janie, by the way, is that an I voted sticker? You're rocking it already? Okay, good. Yeah, you should all be getting one in the mail if you guys haven't already got one. So, and vote centers are open. But the politics part of the elections are the things I don't like. I prefer to focus on working through the issues and not the campaigning part. So let's get into it. I know Muriel and Ken also, we're gonna turn it over to you guys too in a second here, but I guess I'll give you a quick outline on the environmental front. Had some really big wins. We've been trying to save wildlife in San Fernando Valley and prevent the collapse of both the Southern California mountain lion, which is now going to soon be listed as an endangered species, and another one just got killed the other week on the 101 freeway. But we're moving forward, trying to build a wildlife corridor over the 101, and also dealing with some of the poison and poaching that have been going on, that have been killing not just our lions, but also, our birds, our raptors, anything basically that eats rats. And this is nasty stuff. So we were able to get a piece of legislation through that will hopefully push businesses to do a better job of cleaning up their trash and not just poison their way out of trash maintenance, because it's really a bad way to deal with trash in the valley too. So we think we're going to get a twofer out of it, where we really get our retail establishments and our homeowners to dig in and do that trash pickup and be diligent about it, and not just throw bait boxes everywhere and leave it all out there, and in the process end up poisoning our wildlife in the basin, in our mountains and beyond. We got a couple important wildfire bills through, but I saw through the chat room, I got to tell you, you got a super majority of Democrats in the legislature and a Democratic governor, but I think we did not do you all enough service when it comes to wildfire protection. And unfortunately, I had a big bond, a wildfire bond, to put on the ballot this cycle that failed. Too much work going on with COVID. People were distracted. And, when you're out of wildfire season, you often hit snooze and say, it's never going to get that bad again. And yet then every year the winds come back. And I know we had one just up Louise even the other day. It's in up Valley Vista, over in Sepulveda Basin. We can talk about that a little bit. We did get a few important measures through in terms of trying to assess the cost to taxpayers of all these wildfires, because you guys are the ones footing the bill, and the bill keeps going up, and it's going to eat into our education budget and our healthcare budget and budget for nursing homes and senior care and all the rest. And I think it's going to end up, climate change, in my view, will probably end up bankrupting the state unless we get ahead of it and deal with it. But the bills we were pushing to, for instance, get you guys incentives to harden your homes and make sure you're not going to be susceptible to ember-driven fires, which is really what a lot of fires in our region are. They're not the big trees that you heard about in Paradise, or what's going on in these national parks when the president came and talked about the trees exploding. That's not really what our backyard looks like. We know it. They're grassland fires. They're brush fires. They're that gully that we haven't done enough to maintain, either on public land or on private land. And it just takes that one ember that slips through your vent or that gets through the gas, has that ember-driven fire in their house. That house acts like a bomb then within the whole neighborhood. And that's what burned my house down back in Woolsey Fire, and so many other people, was not like just a wall of fire hitting us, right? It's that ember-driven work. So we did get a bill through, at least to get some ember-resistant zones and really try to get homeowners looking at that 0 to 5 feet area. We're going to be doing a town hall next week, actually, where we go on site with a homeowner. I think we're going out to either Topanga or Chatsworth next week, and there will be one on the 12th and one on the 19th. But trying to coach you guys to understand just the simple things you can do. Not super expensive. You don't need to get a huge water hose even, or a foam system. It's literally about checking those vents, checking those gutters, minding the dried plants in that 0 to 5 feet, and getting yourselves ready. Those of you especially who live near the hillsides. Other fronts that we're going to talk about today, but those of you who live in the hillsides and in the flats part of Encino, housing is a huge, huge issue, especially when it comes to land use and zoning. And the state has been really aggressive these days, trying to push through more mandates and less local control when it comes to how housing is going to be constructed. Now, I actually believe we do need more affordable housing, but I think we need it in the right places. And I think it needs to still have your voice and input to really make that housing work, especially when it comes to permanent supportive housing and shelters and opportunities to get folks who are in homelessness who want a house. They should be able to get into some kind of shelter. And we're trying to find those opportunities. But when it comes to developers' influence in the capital and the sort of broader influence around housing, it's something that I would be concerned about if I were you all. I had to take some lonely positions on legislation in the Senate this year, and Democrats don't always agree with Democrats. I was actually I had to vote against even the leader of the Senate's legislation to fourplex essentially the entire state of California, other than historic areas. And the bill eventually fell off, but that 39 votes against you is a daunting thing. But that bill, SB 1120, ended up failing, and a number of other bills that will have impacts on our community did move through, though. And we can talk about some of them in detail, but some of it, like there's one about density bonuses and the lessening restrictions on developers in terms of putting enough parking in place. That was AB 2345. That was another one I did not end up supporting. I did end up supporting a bill about low-income student housing near transit, which I think is actually a place we should be saying yes. And I think that is an important area, especially when it comes to students who don't drive as much, don't use cars in the same way. And I thought low-income students, okay, that's a place to say yes. There was a group of bills they called Nix the Nine that were a lot of homeowners groups, advocacy groups were pushing to stop. The only one that really got through, we 1120 didn't make it. Another one, SB 995, didn't. I also pushed back on another one called SB 1385 that would have allowed in commercial zoned areas to flip that into housing quickly. And I actually think that could be a good idea in certain areas where our malls are abandoned, but it didn't make sense the way it was set up. There was also a bill about rezoning single family sites into 4-unit parcels, but that failed, as well as another bill that I opposed, made it all the way to the very end, and then got stopped. And here, the message I would just give you is, we as a community do need to find places to say yes. And I think that there are really important places in Encino and beyond, Canoga Park, Winnetka, Reseda, that we are going to have to find ways to grow and grow smart. But my central concern is when you're building up in the canyons, when you're building into areas with heavy fire risk, and when you're cutting out local control, you're really putting us at odds with communities that otherwise want to be put in a position to say yes. So your advocacy was actually quite effective. And if you're looking next year, I think a lot of these bills are going to come back. And I would just say, lean on our office as a resource, because we want to get you interconnected with similarly situated communities that are right by a freeway with some access to transit, but with fire risk in the hillsides and homelessness issues nearby and all kinds of those challenges, and to really start to unify your voice so you don't feel powerless. It's one thing to go bark at Paul Koretz, and you need to do that. He does need to hear from you and other folks at city and the county level, but it's easy to sleep on Sacramento and not pay attention to what's going on out there. And if you all don't stay vigilant, we're not going to make much progress on this front. The other issue I just want to touch on briefly was in the homelessness world, and some of that does have to do with housing and getting more permanent supportive housing in place and services, but it's also about the most gravely disabled, the folks who you probably run into where that cause you the concern when you're walking under a freeway to go get a cup of coffee, or that you interact with and seem erratic or seem like, should they be on medication, or am I dealing with a mental health issue here, and make you uncomfortable? That slice of the unhoused community is in fact a very, very small piece of it. Most folks experiencing homelessness are those driven to it for economic reasons, or because of domestic violence, or ran away from home because of being pushed out. Maybe they're LGBTQ youth, they're 10 times more likely to be homeless. Or people you don't see, folks who have been living in the basin, or folks who want to stay out of sight. The issue is the folks who are the most prominent are gravely disabled, not because of their physical condition, but because of either drug addiction or mental health challenges that they're going through, where frankly, the criminal justice system has been used as the crux, we're using cops essentially as social workers. And that's a stupid way to address a mental health and drug addiction crisis. And so rather than make law enforcement just try to kind of arrest our way through this or clear people out and treat them just like property, we're actually trying to mandate diversion into things like outpatient therapy to folks into services. But there's some tough calls that have to be made. And I pushed a couple bills through that'll now force LA County to start hopefully spending some more of the dollars that they've got stockpiled. We ordered an audit of LA County, and it turned out there's a fair amount of dollars that aren't being utilized in the San Fernando Valley or anywhere else to provide service. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that if we can, as a community, start to make our voices unified and heard and work with the county, and Supervisor Kuehl is our representative there, and to really say, yes, it's got to be a housing issue, but it's also got to be a mental health services issue. And there are a lot of taxpayer dollars that you've already paid that are sitting there. And if we can get better hands-on services, and Ken's going to talk a little bit about this issue, but if we can help get people into drug treatment, into outpatient services, through a continuum of engagement where it's not just like arrest you or nothing, or put you under a 5150 hold, or send you back out on the streets and recycle people. That's not the way to fix this problem. So we pushed a few bills through. We got our audit done. It's put some pressure on the county to step up. We're going to be there too. But I don't think it's any freedom at all to die on the streets. And people who refuse services and are hurting that badly and really don't have the capacity to make those decisions for themselves, I think that we actually have to help them into care. So we'll need your help on that front. And we can get into that a little more later, just what the state can do. But it has to do with what they call the Lanterman-Petrie Short Act, LPS Reform. And this is about how to bring folks into things like conservatorships, where you essentially go into the wardship of the state of California or the county. And for a temporary period, we take you in our wardship, try to get you back on your medication. Folks aren't just broken forever. We saw a man get killed down in Orange County who was a soccer dad, and had a job. And then because of schizophrenia and getting off, ended up in a confrontation with police and ended up dying in a use of force incident. But that guy was a dad coaching soccer 2 years prior. So we can't write people off forever, but medication and mental health treatment are a huge part of it. And we've got to go through some uncomfortable conversations, I think, as a community about what we're willing people to do. There's a lot of civil liberties concerns in this space, and I've been criticized at times by ACLU and others for the position of, trying to force people into care. But I consider it the most compassionate thing we can do sometimes, to actually show people the path. And anyway, we can talk about all that a little more, and I can answer your questions. Muriel, I know we want to know about the basin this summer, especially around fire. We know it's also, there have been sweeps in the homeless community too, but the impact on habitat right now from these fires has been enormous. So before we go over to Ken and take some questions from the rest of the community, can you just give us a little bit of an overview of what's going on in this gem in the San Fernando Valley that is somehow still persisting as a wild ecosystem, that we still on Burbank Boulevard can have a great heron fly over our car and we're like on Waze and suddenly we're awake and we feel human again? Like, how is this possible, and can we hold on? Do you still have hope that the basin can be a preserve for years to come?
I do. And the wildlife reserve in the Sepulveda Basin is a readily accessible bit of nature in the center of the San Fernando Valley. It's so important to make sure that it endures. It gives residents of the valley and well beyond a place where they can easily enjoy the kind of natural beauty they otherwise need to take long trips to a flat trails that most people can walk on. It's a magnet for bird watchers, photographers, nature education. San Fernando Valley Audubon and the Resource Conservation District of the Santa Monica Mountains provide many field trips there mostly for elementary and middle school students. Local colleges, universities, and other schools bring biology and ecology classes there. It's enjoyed by homeschool groups and classes of developmentally challenged students. Scouts and other youth groups attend it. Many families stroll its paths. It's an opportunity for many people to decompress and escape everyday stress without traveling very far. As was widely publicized, on September 6th, a disastrous fire burned 70 to 80% of the wildlife reserve. It was one of several fires within the past year within the wildlife reserve and elsewhere in Sepulveda Basin. Could you show the photos? Megan? Thanks. Okay. The first photo is just an introduction during a cleanup along the creek. Here are on the left a photo of kids at the microscope station on a field trip being watched by white pelicans and great egret, and on the right some of the beautiful waterfowl in the wildlife lake in happier times. Next. Here's a group of students from UCLA getting a weekend tour of the wildlife reserve. Next. Here is after the fire. A tremendous amount of devastation. There are significant patches that did not burn, including up many parts of the edges of the wildlife lake. Next. On the left, you have those UCLA students again strolling the path, and here on the right is the same path post-fire. You can see some of the shrubs are still alive. On the left, another tour for the UCLA class with me, and on the right, a related area nearby. Next. And here you have on the two photos above, post-fire, and below you have post-fire an area that did not burn. And you can see not only a lot of shrubs, oak trees in the distance, then shrubs with a homeless encampment or two, and in front of it, one of the huge culprits in the wildfire, most recent wildfire, and that is dead mustard plants. Next, please. And here is the same photo you see behind Pat. And this was taken just a few days after the wildfire. The birds have not all left. There's still a lot of life in the lake. So hope for the future amid destruction. And let's stop here with the photos. Beside the apparent presence of at least one arsonist, contributing factors to the fires included that huge amount of dry mustard and many homeless encampments. Nature will help the wildlife reserve recover. Most of the trees survived the fire. Some that did perish will send up shoots from their roots. Many of the shrubs that burned will regrow from their roots. Nature will also cause regrowth of exotic weeds like the mustard, and it must be controlled to reduce fire hazards and also to help the desirable plants to be able to grow. Fortunately, most of the major hardscape, like viewing structures, bridges, and pathways, survived with little damage. On its own, the bleak landscape should look much better by next spring, especially more so if there's decent rain. The devastation should give incentive to plan and properly plant the 2 large fields that in the past have been largely left to luck and nature to give plants to. For example, the field west of Haskell Creek was only planted around its perimeter when it was converted from sod farm to wildlife reserve around 22 years ago. This is the time to plant an oak or oak savanna there in what was previously a weedy, shrubby field. The informal path that used to allow people to walk around the east side of the wildlife lake against the rules should be turned into a proper path, and that area improved as well. Our educational signage had deteriorated and was worsened by the fire. It's time to update the signage. We also need to add displays that explain why hunting and fishing are not allowed in the reserve and why people should not introduce plants into this natural area or unwanted pests. Now, to add to the challenges that we are really working very hard, the Wildlife Areas Steering Committee and its subcommittee, the Post-Fire Committee, there's a new and unexpected challenge. Could I have the last photo, please? This green stuff here is the wildlife lake infested suddenly by water lettuce. This is an invasive exotic plant. It's growing frighteningly fast, threatening to choke the lake. It looks like agencies at the city, county, and federal level are about to work on controlling and removing it, but I'm not quite so sure. We had a long conference call with the Army Corps of Engineers this afternoon, and it doesn't look like they'll be able to do much, if anything, to help, which is a very discouraging non-achievement. Volunteers are eager to help. It is a huge task. They certainly can't manage the whole thing, but hopefully we will see volunteers getting together using rakes, pool skimmers, and bags, and bagging the stuff up. Recreation and Parks, which has done only a very little bit of raking themselves, will pick up the bags and haul it away. So it's a huge problem. It will be a greater problem if it gets into the LA River, which this threatens to flow into the LA River through Haskell Creek imminently. It's a huge issue, but we have other things too. Law and rule enforcement need to be increased. The Post-Fire Committee is working on new law enforcement signage, which has been critically needed for years. You need that kind of signage for law enforcement to be possible. The enforcement itself should primarily be the responsibility of the Recreation and Parks Rangers and should be consistent and educational, their enforcement and the signs, as well as referencing municipal codes and telling the punishments for breaking the law. Members of the steering committee and its post-fire committee are working hard to organize the recovery and improvement of this once and future world-class small urban wildlife reserve. It is so important to many people, providing an accessible natural environment in the middle of an increasingly dense and man-made community. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Muriel. And before I move to Ken, I did want to acknowledge folks in the chat. I'm following along with you, and like Glenn Bailey mentioning state needing to step up enforcement on no fishing at the lake. I know there are some questions that we can get into it during Q&A. I think Kira Durbin had a comment, and maybe Judith Goddesfield too, about just the safety of going there and interacting and some of the encampment issues. So maybe we can deal with some of that in the Q&A. I just want to let you guys know in the chat boxes that we're not going to leave you guys hanging. So keep that coming and we'll compile it. But Ken, do you want to just outline some of the mission of Hope of the Valley, talk a little bit about the unhoused community, the issues affecting homelessness? We touched on a little bit earlier, but talk a little bit about what you're doing. And before you do though, Muriel, let's make sure in the chat box and then on Facebook Live, how folks can get involved helping with you, volunteering, getting involved with your committees. Jeremy and Megan can get that going, because I know that was a few answers. And meanwhile, Ken, take it away. And thank you for doing sacred work truly every single day in our backyard.
Well, thank you, Senator. It's good to be part of the conversation here, because yes, we're doing it every day, but we don't see everything every day. And as a community, oftentimes you see pockets of things that are disturbing, and you're wondering, why hasn't somebody done something about that? And what I'd like to do is, because I believe that many of you that are on this call right now, because you deeply care about Encino, you care about the community, you care about the Valley. And some of the things that you see are disturbing, they're frustrating. And I share those same frustrations. Hope of the Valley, we are one service provider in a whole team of providers that are working diligently trying to address the homeless crisis. If you've lived in LA or in the Valley for any length of time, you probably have noticed what seems to be an increase in homelessness, or at least it's more visible because of the numbers of tents and encampments that you are seeing. And what I want to do is just maybe give a positive message, because I realize that when you look around and you see encampments where they weren't before, and you see trash and you see rubbish, and it might seem like it's out of control, and at times it is, but please know that there really is a master plan that is being unfolded right now. And it started with the mayor of Los Angeles declaring a state of emergency. And that was a bold move, and it was a necessary move. We had the bond measures that were passed, that, the Triple H, $1.2 billion to create, 10,000 units of affordable housing. And then, the bond measure H, which was the wraparound services. And I know it can be discouraging. You're reading the LA Times and you're seeing that only 2 or 3 of these, permanent supportive housing units have come online. It can be, you might feel like nothing's taking place, but I want you to know right now that there are more people being housed through crisis, interim, and permanent supportive housing right now in the San Fernando Valley than we have ever had before. We're one agency, and I can tell you, every given night, right now, we have 509 people that are being housed. That's families, that's moms and kids, that's youth, those that have timed out of foster care. That's our emergency shelter in Coima. That's the bridge shelters in North Hollywood and in Van Nuys. And I'm in conversation with a lot of the city council members, and personally, I'm optimistic. I'm excited. I see what's in the pipeline, but it's going to require us to stay the course and not to get too discouraged and overwhelmed, because we're going to see change. Just the numbers of the interim housing, this year alone in the San Francisco, I know there was the women's only shelter that was up in Somewhere that was open, the North Hollywood that was open, the Van Nuys that was open, in Canoga Park, that's going to be opening hopefully by the end of the year. And then there's these tiny villages in which, Councilman Blumenfield, he's got 2 of those that he's working on in his district. And then also Paul Krikorian has 3 in his district. And I know John Lee is looking at some of those, and I'm in conversation with John Lee about a couple projects that would really be game changers. And so we didn't get into this problem overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. And it's going to require continued focus and attention. And it starts with outreach and engagement. And you need to know, even in the Sepulveda Basin, and I know weekly, multiple times during the week, there are outreach teams that are going into the basin, okay? Outreach and engagement, engaging people that are homeless and saying, listen, you know what, we want to talk to you about alternatives, about a better way of living and not having to live like this. And I realize we're probably short on time, but I got to tell you a quick story. There's a gentleman that had, he was taken to one of our, brand new bridge shelters. And I looked at him and I said, my question every time I talk to someone who's homeless is, what's your story? What's your story? How did this happen to you? What happened? And he looked at me and he said, Ken, I was a local baseball coach. I owned a home right over here because I was married, had kids. He goes, unfortunately, I went through divorce. I lost everything. He had a job in animation. And then he was homeless. And while he was homeless, somebody introduced him to crystal meth. And for 2.5 years, he chased the drug. He thought for sure that he was going to die. He was beat up multiple times. He slept on the concrete. He wasn't part of an encampment. And then when the new bridge shelter opened up, one of the outreach teams went to him and said, listen, are you ready for a fresh start? He said, yes. He came, and when I was talking to him, I said, man, you look really good. He goes, I haven't touched this stuff in 3 weeks. I came back 2 weeks later. He goes, Ken, he goes, guess what? He goes, I got a job. He goes, I went to every business in this area until somebody hired me. And now I'm working. And I went back again, that was about 2 weeks ago. And he said, he goes, I'm not going to be here very long. I'm saving my money. I'm going to be moving out, and I've been drug free. And so those are the stories of people that outreach goes out. They talk to them, they reach them, then they bring them in. Now, we do have a problem. We don't have enough shelter beds. Okay, we certainly don't have enough permanent supportive housing. Okay, but there is a master plan across the entire city. And yes, there's been some NIMBYism and some pushback, and we don't want to, and I get that. And I totally agree with the senator that it needs to make sense. It needs to be in the right place. But I believe there's plenty of places, throughout the valley that everyone can actually help with, bearing the load of creating a life of health and normalcy. Stories go on and on, and I'll end with a story from somebody from Encino. Okay, he's a very successful businessman who lives up in the hills, and he owns a 10-bedroom house. And I challenged him. I started this one thing called the Empathy Encounter, where I challenge successful business people to come spend the night at the shelter incognito. Nobody knows who you are. And so this guy, he goes, I'll do it. I'll take you up on it. I said, you need to dress down though, okay? He tried to dress down, but he didn't. He didn't have any old enough clothes. But anyhow, he showed up, and I dropped him off outside of a waiting line to be picked up for the cold weather shelter. He drove in a van with 15 other people hacking and coughing. And he goes, I thought for sure I was going to get sick, being in that van with everybody. He showed up to the shelter, and the security had to pat him down and then escorted him in. And by the way, we had a wristband on him, so we knew who he was. Okay. And we put him in a cot. And then after he was in that cot, he spent the night. And he said, Ken, I've never heard so many sounds throughout the night. You wouldn't believe it. I can't believe anybody sleeps in this. And he woke up the next morning, and I picked him up, and I said, so how was it? And he said, Ken, probably the most powerful thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't even realize these people existed. He goes, I get in my car, I get on the freeway, I drive to work. He goes, when I was having dinner, I sat next to a woman. She must have been close to 70. I asked her, I said, how are you here? What's your story? And she was married, lived in Burbank, and her husband, they just didn't make provisions for retirement. He died suddenly, unexpectedly. And then she ended up being evicted from her place and was living behind a dumpster at a Vons shopping center until she was able to find this pathway to get help. And so, we see that every day, whether it's mental health, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's people that have truly lost jobs, fallen on hard times, it's the elderly, it's the LGBTQ, it's those who transition out of foster care. And our job is to do anything and everything we can to help people get off the streets. During the COVID, we were, actively engaged, and we were able to open up 6 COVID shelters throughout the San Fernando Valley. That's what Hope of the Valley did, and you had LA Family Housing, who took on the Project Room Keys and the motels. And so I can tell you right now, again, we are doing more now than has ever been done. And so I say, let's stay the course. Let's not get discouraged. We are doing, if you see areas that need outreach and engagement, let us know, so we can get, the teams out there. We can't make things, but there's the master plan. The bigger plan is options, so that if we need to bring enforcement in a healthy way, we have the alternatives. Again, Senator, thank you again for the opportunity.
And thank you, not just for sharing these stories, but changing stories. People come in with the story, it's going one way, but when you put your work in, you actually turn people around. It's you give me some hope too, sir. So sincerely appreciate it. And I think we can't let our fears and cynicism, turn us fatalistic about all this, and realize that people can change. So thank you for stepping in, and we're going to need your help going forward in a big way. And frankly, we should be investing more in places like yours to get this work done. Not enough of it, and the services need to increase, not decrease. So I'd say beyond staying the course, let's increase, let's double down. This is, especially in the Valley, this is a moment to do more, not less. So hey, knowing that we're almost approaching the 6 o'clock hour, we won't make it a hard stop, because we do have some questions that have been coming in. And I know Jonathan, Pat, Claudia, Janie, and Rob, you're all community leaders, but you're also going to be our facilitators here of helping through our Q&A. So why don't you guys take it away? And I think Pat might have our first kickoff question, but then know that those of you throwing stuff into the chat room, we won't leave you hanging. My team will be tracking it, and we'll get to all of you. But I'll moderate, and Pat, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. Great seeing everyone here. Thank you so much for the presentations. It gives you hope. Muriel, what can be done to keep to restore our basin areas, keep them clean and usable and safe? And we've got a lot of people in the chat that are interested in helping with our water lettuce. So just if you'd say a couple words about where people can jump in. We're going to have the world's biggest lettuce harvest in there.
Well, before I start with the volunteers, who are terribly important, I have to give a pitch for we need more law enforcement. We need for significant, frequent enforcement by the city park rangers. We barely exist in how their time is allocated. We also need for the LAPD to be more aware of the various areas in the wildlife reserve and to be able to spend some time on the relatively minor infractions that build and build and build and build up. And we need these things to have basically for anything to be handleable otherwise and for the place to be safe. I'm not saying that it's not a safe place, but I wouldn't go there by myself. I would only go there with at least one other person. So we need public safety involvement much more than we have had it. Secondly, volunteers are wonderful. We've had many volunteer cleanups of the creek in the past and other areas in the wildlife reserve. I would love to have people out there helping to get rid of the water lettuce. trying to organize an event is virtually impossible right now because of the pandemic. So unless somebody else can really step up and try to figure out how to do that, what I would urge is to go there with a rake, an old pool net, or somebody suggested to me today, an old tennis racket, scoop the stuff from the shore towards you. Most of the water lettuce, this will depend on the wind, is toward the north end of the lake. In other words, the end closest to the parking and where most people enter. Stuff it in large trash bags. I can get some trash bags from recreation parks, but I can't always be there to hand them out. I would recommend labeling the trash bags, if they're not black ones, with the words noxious weeds, so unknowledgeable people won't dump them back in the lake thinking they're doing the right thing. And leave them alongside the edge of the main pathway. You might let me know, and I texted to the senator's office a few minutes ago an email address you can reach me at, and I will forward to Recreation and Parks when and where they should please pick stuff up. So yes, you can help. I don't think right now that we will have a big group because of the pandemic. However, you can keep yourself posted by going to the Sepulveda Basin Wildlife.org website and also the SFV Audubon .org websites. And again, I think that will be posted by the senator's office.
And how about this idea, Muriel? Just so you don't feel, it feels good to have critical mass, but this is not a time to gather in big groups. So if you do go out there with your pod, say with your family, you and a friend who are your roommate, someone that you're already in your cohort with, and you're masked up and you're doing it safely. If you go fish out some water lettuce, we'll match you. We'll go out there solo, and then we can all start posting our stories. And then that way, maybe you don't feel as alone when you're doing your work and chip away. And I promise you, Muriel, I'll lean on City Rec and Parks too to make sure that whatever this community here puts in terms of effort gets cleaned up. And we're going to work on that law enforcement issue because people shouldn't feel afraid to go to that basin. That's a tragedy that you actually, you have to think twice about going somewhere alone. So we'll that's on our radar too. So thanks for leaning in there. But let's play a little game. Take a selfie with your water lettuce, and we'll have a little contest here in Encino. See what we can get done. Maybe we'll even challenge Lake Balboa and Tarzana to a salad competition of some sort.
Where would people post what they've done?
So they can just send us in their photos, and we'll start posting them. And we've got all your info in that chat, so don't you worry, Muriel. We're gonna make sure we get some volunteers and get out there and do it. But one by one, we'll get it done. Claudia, hey, I know you're a very busy and Zoom fatigued person these days, running Westmark through the most difficult distance learning period ever, especially with students who might not find that platform particularly useful. You did have a question, I think, about fire safety, but I just want to take a second, have you introduce yourself also to the community and just explain to them what you've been doing at Westmark, because I truly think you're breaking paths every day in terms of teaching to all types of students, including those with learning disabilities, developmental disabilities, and our council there on dealing with students with autism and other learning disabilities has been, to me, tremendously exciting and innovative work. So say hi to everybody at least, and then you can ask your question.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having us. And one thing that I wanted to say in terms of your comments earlier is that, mental health is critical, and not only for, what is happening with our homeless situation here in Encino, but also for our students who are learning from home and are being able to have access to all the right interventions that they need. So kudos to the parents who are day in and day out supporting our students at home. We know that these are very difficult times, and I know that the teachers in the public school system are doing a tremendous job in trying to support our students as well. So here at Westmark, we support students with dyslexia, with attention deficit, and as you mentioned, with other learning differences. We're also committed to supporting teachers in the public school sector so that we can provide training and education and services so that we can actually work together. So thank you for that opportunity. I do have a question in regards to the wildfires, and it's a two-part question, Senator Stern. The first part of the question is, given that the governor just vetoed fire safety legislation, what can the legislature do to address the growing wildfire danger?
You've got to let him know that you're disappointed with him. And I consider him a friend and a partner, but also don't pull punches when he makes decisions I disagree with. That's not really my job, is to all be buddies here. And the fact is that he vetoed a bill called SB 182 that I helped write that would have restricted long-term, what they call RENA, more regional housing needs being put into fire zones. I've got an even more aggressive bill I couldn't even get a hearing on, which would have stopped development altogether in our very high fire severity zones. So literally a moratorium on new development in the very, very highest severity zones. But he's got to know that it's a problem for us, even those of you who don't live directly in the fire zone. And I'm going to need your help next year. The bill right now I've got is called SB 474, but we're going to bring it back in some other form. And I'm just praying for initially a hearing. But I got to tell you, the very high fire severity zones are also primo property, right? So if you're a developer, where do you want to be? You want to be on the hilltops, right? You want the view. You want to go up that canyon. So the pressure from developers out there to put more and more development, and we're not talking about affordable housing here, folks. We're talking about the McMansions and new things way up our canyons. That stuff to me doesn't help serve anybody. And frankly, you're going to end up paying for it with your taxpayer dollars when we got to go put out fires there, right? So you're subsidizing some new mansion up in the hillsides that shouldn't be there in the first place. So I'm frustrated, as you might be able to tell, especially as somebody who lost their place to a fire. And we've got to stop permitting these places. And Judith, I agree, we should not issue those permits. I tried to get Bill to stop issuing those permits, but it's really up to city and county to do that. And they've yet to adopt those ordinances. So that could be some follow-up work too, is really trying to work on city and county in terms of trying to at least do some rezoning work there. But look, you can't just say no in the top of the hillsides. Again, as Ken pointed out, we got to find places to say yes to. So that's the thing with our community, is like, there are places to say no that don't make sense, but then there are places where we do have to say yes, right? By our transit, or in an area that's an old abandoned parking lot that no one's using, or on an old church property that they want to be put into use. So we got to get smart about that. And on that note, I know, Jonathan, you had a question about, I think it was what affordable housing is going on in our backyard.
I do. Thank you, Senator.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is for Alex. Alex, what affordable housing projects are on the schedule for Encino that you're aware of?
So the easy answer, Jonathan, is none that I'm aware of. And when it comes to affordable housing, we really have to look at what is affordable. We get projects that come to us and say, well, look, we're going to, and I like easy math. Math and I are acquaintances. We're certainly not friends. So when I speak in math, I'm going to keep it simple. But let's say a developer comes to us and says, I want to build 100 units, but I'm going to do 25 that are for low income or affordable housing. But then they ask the city for all these different exemptions, like, you know something, we only need 60 parking spaces for all 100 units. And for me, that doesn't really work, because most people out here love their cars. And I can say, living in an area of Encino that is mostly condos and apartments, when you don't give enough parking, there isn't enough parking on the street, and people will turn to either parking on the boulevard or parking in residential areas, and that really doesn't work. And then what is affordable out of a $2,000 a month studio unit?
That's
So
right.
that to me isn't really affordable. You know, we have a daughter who's 19, and I hope to say this loud enough that she can hear. I would love for her to move out when the time is ready and when she can afford it. But right now, unless she goes to a different state, that's not even possible within this state. And in the industry that she's chosen to go to, she sort of needs to be in LA or in New York. So we have to define what affordable is. And when looking at affordable housing, are there areas? I'm certain there are areas we can find, even in Encino, that could have affordable housing. And I am so easy. You give me parking, you can have your development, because give people a place to park. They're happy tenants. They'll stay there longer. I like longevity when people come into a community, but we certainly need to look at what is affordable. To me, a percentage of a high monthly figure, that's not affordable. It doesn't really do a lot of help for people. So once we can have that discussion of what is affordable, and of course, if it doesn't cost too much to build, because obviously the construction costs out here they're crazy. They're extremely expensive. So we need to look at what is truly affordable and have that discussion before you get someone saying, oh, I'm going to have some affordable apartments that truly aren't affordable.
Thanks, Alex.
Couldn't agree more, Alex. And, you know, you got to really distinguish with this legislation. There have been some really important bills looking strictly at low-income housing and dealing with, for instance, the churches, places of worship, nonprofits, places that have, say, parking lots on site that want to do more shelter work. I think we should be saying yes in a lot of those areas. But when it comes to sort of using the housing crisis as a proxy for letting people build more mansions or further accelerate, you know, gentrification, that's where I'm really been pushing back. So we got to be ready. There's a density bonus bill that will sort of build on what the city's already got in place, AB 2345. You guys should really keep your eye on as some of these developments come down the pike. It'll affect certainly parking along Ventura Boulevard and places like that. So I know that's a big issue. And frankly, parking, you know, it sounds just like, oh, you're annoyed residents who want to be able to find a parking spot. But the fact is, when these streets get clogged up and you have intersections where you have no visibility into them and you park all the way to the corners or you're in the red zones, and then you've got to go cross, say, a 4-lane boulevard through the San Fernando Valley with people coming 60 miles an hour over the speed limit, we lose lives too. It becomes a public safety issue here too. And that parking becomes a spillover effect that, you know, has hit our community personally. We tragically lost a young man this past year out in Van Nuys, a D Toledo student. And I fear that if we don't get our heads around how to handle the influx of cars and parking here and make our streets a little safer, we're going to really be in for a world of hurt going forward. Who's next here on our list? I think is Rob. You wait a second. Yeah, I think Rob, you had one, right, Mr. Glushon?
Sure.
Jump in. Thanks for being patient.
Thank you to you and all the panelists, but I do, Henry, want to give kudos to you and your staff for always being responsive. We can't say that for all of our elected officials. Before I ask you the question that people on the Encino Property Owners Association are very, very hot about, agitated about, I want to make sure that the participants understand some of the different roles of the community groups that are part of these discussions. Alex, thank you for all you have done. I used to sit in Alex's seat, and I'm glad he's there, and I'm not. I served my sentence. But the Encino Neighborhood Council is composed of stakeholders from all walks of life in Encino. It's homeowners, tenants, businesses, schools like Claudia's, synagogues, churches. And that is what neighborhood councils were supposed to be. And it's challenging because when you get all the various aspects of a community together in one room, I used to like to joke, you can't even get agreement on when to adjourn. The Encino Property Owners Association, which I was president of 20 years ago, and I'm pulled back in as we're trying to rejuvenate it, for 55 years has been a homeowners group. So while we will work with the business community, we will work with schools and synagogues and churches and other stakeholders, we make no apologies for being the advocates of homeowners and residents. And because of that, the question that I have for Henry is, when you talk about these past high density housing bills that threaten single family zoning, the good news is 7 out of 9 bills died. 2 got passed. Personally, the 2 got passed, I don't think are going to make any real impact in our community. But we can only elect you. We can only elect Jesse Gabriel as an assemblyman. We don't have any ability to really influence the other state legislators. So the question for you is, how can you get your, and I'm going to be partisan here, I am a Democrat, a progressive, but how can you get your Democratic leadership to understand that the answer to the housing crisis should not be to destroy single-family neighborhoods north and south of a transit corridor like Ventura Boulevard? On Ventura Boulevard, through density bonuses, we actually have high vacancy rates. So building the housing, even on Ventura Boulevard with transit, there's empty units there. But how do you get your leadership to understand that whatever high density housing they live in San Francisco, and the vertical housing that they think is the answer to the housing crisis, it needs to go in appropriate areas if they're going to take away local control, which we do not support, and I don't think you do either, except where local cities are failing to do their fair share. That's not happening in Los Angeles. We have density bonus through state law. We have TOC, which is a fancy term for high density, incentivized, as long as you provide some affordable housing, but in commercial or multi-family zoning. So how do you get your leadership so that you know this is coming back next year?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think the head of the Senate's from San Diego, and the head of the Assembly's from South LA. And I think what they started to realize at the end of the session, and hopefully this governor does too, is that San Francisco isn't California. And there's actually a lot more legislators from other parts of California, like the parts that we live in, little communities like us with little communities and huge communities, right? All through the Bay Area, through San Diego. And I think that there's a reticence sometimes when the drum is being beaten so loud on one version of solving the housing crisis that, frankly, I think developers are leading, and to start to politically push back and say that we're not interested in being bought out or subsidizing new McMansions all over the state of California, but we do want to solve homelessness, and start to reposition the issue to say, you know, we do want to say yes to housing, but not in places that are going to cost us and are going to burn down. So I think if we come out the gates, I'm trying to figure out a proactive, positive agenda to put forth a plan in this coming session that's where we're saying yes, and rally legislators from all over the state, not just to push back, but to find creative solutions. By the way, it's not just about just volume of housing. Affordability has to do with a number of other factors. You know, small business crisis going on, digging our way out of this pandemic. And we actually don't know right now how much more housing we're going to need based on the crushing hit that we've taken from COVID. So I think some folks are really rethinking the presumption that we just have to blindly go for broke and just build everywhere as much as we possibly can and get rid of all zoning across the state and kind of pump the brakes on that. And I'll tell you, the media has been helpful with it. You know, watching the New York Times, for instance, just do a piece in the Daily and in their front page. I mean, it made the New York Times or the LA Times all the time, but about the sort of breakneck pace that we're building into the wildland urban interface and that it's costing us. So those kinds of issues maybe will make my colleagues rethink things. But, you know, part of it's also politics. And like, I go work with Senator Wiener, for instance, from San Francisco on the issues I was just talking about with mental health and drug treatment. And I don't castigate the guy and say, you know, personally attack him, but I definitely tell him he's dead wrong when it comes to how he's approaching housing. So it's also about how to make friends and like not completely, crucify those you disagree with, but get more influential. And look, I've been at this for 3.5 years, and I think they treated me like the rookie out the gates. And they said, why, Stern, why are you holding off on that bill? 39 other senators are for it. Why are you off? And lo and behold, we did our work. The bill died. Like, we got enough going because folks like you got involved. So I'm slowly trying to get my leadership legs under me too, and not just be like the humble martyred no vote, but really build coalitions and get more people throughout Los Angeles, Ventura County, our immediate region on board. And I think it's starting to work. I try not to horn too much, but I think we're actually starting to make progress. And these forums are really chances for me to get that fodder I need to get that information and go to work. But look, the rest of the LA delegation needs to hear from you. I mean, that's the best thing I could ask for you is like, go talk to Bob Hertzberg, my next door neighbor in the San Fernando Valley, and let him know too. Go talk, have these conversations with Jesse Gabriel and talk to your supervisor also. Sheila Kuehl, I saw some chatter about Paul Koretz and this sort of valley-only idea of a valley-only city council seat. CD5 goes across that 101 down the 405, and it's hard to balance the west side of the valley. And we're very different cultures, right? And we're very different lifestyles and very different land use. And I know why Paul has to spend so much time on the west side, because there's so much to deal with there. But the same thing goes, by the way, for that supervisorial seat, right? That district, we're in District 3. We want Sheila Kuehl really laser focused on our valley. And that means you guys got to keep being squeaky wheel, keep calling her, and really say that, look, if we're not going to get our own seat for the valley, we sure as heck better have a solid voice. And I think that that's just something that, look, the 405 is a daunting commute. So you can tell why it's easy for a representative to get sort of west side vision. But I love our valley. And anyway, I'm with you all the way on it, and just try to keep being nice to people, but not so nice that you roll over, right? Like, you don't want to be that guy. We also, I know, Rob, there was a question about a park with some fire issues. I did want to say, and I don't know if Jonathan, you were going to ask about that, but please send us, I don't know which park the question came in about, but if you guys, those of you who are homeowners and are doing your part and live near fire zones, brush zones, I agree Sepulveda Basin should be one of those zones, by the way. But those of you living in that sort of interface, they call it the WUI, a wildland urban interface, right? You don't live in the woods. You live like on the edge of a park or on open space. If you see that either the state or the city or the county isn't doing their part to maintain that property, that's somewhere that I can help you really lean on that. Because if you as the property owners or your homeowners association are doing what you need to do, and you're hardening your home, or you're clearing your brush, or you're making sure you don't have a pergola right under your gutters, and you're doing your part, we've got to then do our part too. So whatever park that was, please send it to me. If it's state park land, we're going to start really putting the screws to state parks to manage their own land better. Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, we happen to control both their budgets. So I'm starting to put the pressure on there, but even if it's city or county too, we're willing to help and kind of get that going. So look out when you're driving through your neighborhood next time, look at that gully or look at that park next door, those areas that you sort of drive by and they look dense and you sort of just forget about them. This is not the time of year to forget about that stuff. The Santa Anas are going to come, and I do not want to angle us on a sour, dark note, but like, it's just a matter of where, not if. It is coming. Yeah, Rob.
One more issue that it's really more of a comment, and you can respond to it.
Yeah, please.
Most people in our community favor criminal justice reform. They want public safety, but they understand the problems in the prison system, and they understand that for years people go to jail and get caught in a cycle for perhaps these lesser or minor offenses. But what we're concerned about is what we read and hear every day. And we don't think it's fake news. And that is repeat violent offenses, drunk drivers who commit murder, vehicle manslaughter. There was a bill passed, I think it's pending before Newsom right now, passed by both houses of the legislature, that would allow judges to not only provide a diversion program for someone who is charged with vehicular manslaughter and other very serious offenses, not minor offenses. And if they complete the diversion, then that is wiped off their record. So how do you balance the need for justice reform, which most people again support, with, I don't want my kids or grandkids mowed down by a drunk driver because under a state law, they got diversion and their prior offenses were wiped from the record.
I'll just say briefly on that, Prop 47, which is really what started a lot of this in terms of Prop 47 and 109 were big ballot propositions that started to move away from incarceration for lesser offenses and into not even diversion, but kind of into nothing. So you can, as long as you're stealing something under $900 now in the state of California, it's a bit of a slap on the wrist. And we've seen that reflected in property crimes in our area, in smash and grabs. And the same does go for some of these offenses you're talking about, Rob. We shouldn't be just incarcerating people and throwing away the key, especially for drug and alcohol related offenses. I don't think we're going to incarcerate our way through the problem, but it's crazy to turn people back out on the streets and just say, do it again. Right now, luckily, you can't, under a law we passed, you can't, if you've had multiple DUIs, you actually can't even start your car again without having a breathalyzer. It's actually installed in the car now. I've lost friends to drunk drivers. I think we should be looking at that more in the vein of violent crime and less so in the vein of drug treatment. When you're using a vehicle like a weapon, you might as well be using a gun. I'm not sure what the governor did with the bill you're talking about or the exact details, but I would say that mandatory treatment and the diversion that happened before Prop 47 came into play, you'd get arrested, but then the drug courts would force you into treatment programs. Now we don't have that forcing function. We don't have the prison system to actually push people into it. So people are just getting spit back out. That's unacceptable. So if we got to go fix that and clean it up in a bill next year, count me in. But look, it's too darn expensive to lock people up for, for long periods of time for drug use. And I actually don't think that that's the way to do it. I don't think that's what you're asking for either. So I think that there's a way to deal with violent crime more intelligently. And anyhow, I'll dig into it and let's see if we need to put some fixes in place. You'll have a big vote, by the way, on prop. I forget. I think it's 22 on that front. So you guys should study up there. Hey, I know we're getting into Lakers hour, or we're already into it. Open. Yeah, we got to go 3-1 here. But do we want to just do a rapid round here? Muriel, you had a question. Muriel Jonathan had a question also about folks in the unhoused community. And Janie also might have had one more question. I know. So do you want to just do those, and then I'll try to figure out if there are any others in the chat, and then we can wrap up from there.
Yeah. Hey, Senator, thank you. I want to preface my question to Ken just real quickly. It's great to be part of the stimulating conversation. I'm going to bow out gracefully in the next 2 minutes. I had a conversation with the Day Toledo and Milken High today at a Zoom call. Really, really poignant. Generation Z is just amazing. They inspire me, but they made 500 sandwiches for us that's going to be distributed at the bridge shelters that Ken mentioned earlier. So I made arrangements to get that around 7, and I really don't want to keep them holding, and we need the sandwiches. So if you guys would let me bow out gracefully, I'm going to ask this question and then get out. Hey, Ken, quick question for you. What protections are in place or will be instituted to protect the unhoused community or the homeless community?
Thanks, Jonathan. And by the way, Jonathan, he serves on our staff, and he has lived experience. He himself was homeless, and you wouldn't know that looking at him now. I mean, the guy is a consummate professional, but he's been there, done that, and he's come out the other side and is an incredible testimony to redemption. So anyhow, Jonathan, I know you got to get going, but are we talking about, there's a lot of different kinds of protections. Are we talking protections during, COVID? The city was very proactive in opening up, the Project Room Keys and opening up the shelters at the Rec and Park centers. I know that there are a lot of folks that are deeply concerned about sweeps that are coming and just moving folks. Yeah. And there are a lot of, right now, reading the LA Times, of course, you see that Judge Carter, that there's a big push right now for the city to create housing for especially for those that are living underneath the freeway underpasses, but also, he's challenged every city council member to create housing for at least 60% of those that were in the last homeless count as of January. And in doing such, he said that would then allow for there to, the city to enforce its no camping rules and regulations. So I know that there are those that may not agree with that and feel like that is inhumane, but my personal conviction is if we're able to provide some form of shelter and housing for people that are living on the streets, then I just don't think living on the streets should be a viable solution. That we need diversion, whether it's getting folks into drug and alcohol programs, which we have our own men's drug and alcohol recovery program, which Jonathan oversees, by the way. And then it's getting folks into the crisis and interim housing. So I know right now there are protections in place, and there should be, because if you have nowhere else to go, if you truly, there is no place for you to go. There are not beds, there's not shelters, there's not housing available, then to just wipe out someone's temporary living condition because it's unsightly, that's inhumane. And so we have to keep the big picture in mind, and we have to pursue it with, I love what the senator said, not to stay the course, but let's double down on it, and let's create the solution that we know is essential for our city.
Thanks, Ken.
Hey, and one last thing, Jonathan, God bless you, sir. And
thank you, Senator.
One thing I'll just say to you too is violence against the unhoused community is completely unacceptable.
Absolutely.
And the kind of stuff goes on the internet, and we see it in our next door groups, and we see it on our Facebook forums. And, you know, it's one thing to deal with a threat against you or your family when you're walking under a bridge, or you have to deal with an unsafe situation, but to actually go out and seek out conflict, and either there have been attacks on people experiencing homelessness, there have been all kinds of targeting going on. We have to stop that, and everyone who's active. I know the people in this forum are our eyes and ears out on Facebook and are really active and leaders in their own right. But when you see it getting ugly like that, when you see it bleeding over from frustration about, say, you know, the drug epidemic, or that we need more shelters, into something that's actually targeting people and putting them on video and saying, go find this person, like you've try to pipe in, because that we're the ones becoming inhuman when that stuff happens.
Hey, Senator, if I could just chime in and dovetail off that, I'm so with you on that. And I think just quickly, the narrative that we see out sometimes through media, and I don't want to pick on them, but we don't see these great human interest stories of the homeless that are really, getting a hold of their lives and moving into something tenable. We see the stigma that, the homeless must have started that fire that we had. Oh, the homeless must have, one incident out of many that tend to be really glaring and repeated over and over. And I think that's really a dangerous road to go down when we keep hearing that. And it really does incite people, and they pick up a whole different perspective that's really untrue about our homeless being so violent. The majority that I've been working with for over a dozen years are incredibly easy to get along. You have mental wellness issues. Of course, we have that in our own families. So let's stop with that. But it's just, they're no more dangerous than anybody else. So I'm so with you on it. Thank you for pointing that out.
You're brave, and your story alone, you're walking testament. And
thank you so much.
So thanks for go get the sandwiches moving.
Okay, I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Hopefully LeBron will back you up. Yeah. We want to keep this going. Janie, did you have one? I think you have a little of another topic to bring up here, right?
I do have a specific question, but I also, first of all, I want to thank all of you for participating. And Henry, thank you for, letting us know that there will be a wildlife corridor made for the mountain lions. And I just want you to know, please feel free to take some of the Encino pedestrian bridge for that. You can use that $20 million to build some wildlife corridors. I mean, we would be ecstatic.
Okay.
So I'm giving you permission from all of the residents near the Encino pedestrian bridge.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to share something before I put the question to you, something that happened since we're talking about homelessness. We had a situation today on my morning walk. I saw a young couple in their 20s. They were drugged out of their minds. They were propped up against AAA on Encino Avenue, and the young woman couldn't hold her torso up. Several hours go by, I'm home, I'm out front, I'm trimming a tree. I see my phone's ringing. I don't pick it up because I'm trying to do what I'm doing. The neighbor ends up driving to my house to tell me the neighbor on Encino Avenue needs my help because there's a homeless woman that is sprawled out on her driveway and she can't get anybody to answer 911. I said, that's ridiculous. Turns out I didn't let it go. I reached out to Koretz's office. I'm calling my senior lead officer who happened to be off today, but I have his personal cell phone. So he called me back. It turns out when those of us who live near a freeway, which Encino's surrounded by two, if you call 911 from your cell phone, it goes to CHP. We have two situations where today and on Sunday, when another neighbor texted me and said, there's a man shooting up at the new mansion that's being built across the street from me. What do I do? I said, dear God, call ACS and call the police. She's texting me saying the police aren't picking up. They're not picking up. So, I ended up calling Rob about this today before this phone call, and we're thinking there's a problem wrong with our city and 911, but it's actually a state situation. And if you call 911 from a cell phone and you live near the freeways, you're getting CHP, and you don't realize that. The person who had the homeless woman never got through to 911. And finally, you know, the woman was sprawled out, passed out on drugs in her driveway all day.
Well, I can tell you, if the routing is going to occur like that and CHP doesn't have the resources to ensure public safety in the area, then we're going to have to change the routing system. So I'll put a call in tonight to figure out what was going on with CHP, because that call's got to be answered, period. Oh. And I would say, you know, to Jonathan's point, I don't know what the housing status of those folks was necessarily, but like people who are addicted to drugs, making you feel unsafe on your house, trespassing, that quickly becomes a law enforcement issue and needs to be dealt with. Now, I will say, I mean, Ken, I don't know if you have any advice in terms of when say LAPD, there's not an actual incident necessarily on your property, what you can tell somebody like Janie or other homeowners who are seeing this, because we know it's happening under freeways. And
I want to share that an ambulance came, but because she could answer 3 questions, they said they couldn't force her to get in it. So then she just passed out on the driveway.
For their 5150. So I actually, yeah, so this is actually one area.
This is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I'm going to run the bill again, and I could use your guys' help, but there's something called the 5150. And essentially, if you are a harm to yourself or a risk to yourself or others, then you can be held, not necessarily incarcerated, but put under temporary hold. But if you can answer those questions right, they can't bring you in. And so we want to try to pursue something like a 5149. In other words, something south of a 5150, where you can still do temporary holds, but not have to go into a full conservatorship that's going to be a super expensive, you know, month-long, keep a person at a hospital and charge taxpayers $100,000, but a way to intervene in the crisis moment. And I'm working on an op-ed actually right now to try to launch legislation with the mental health services director for LA County. So stay tuned on that. But honestly, Janie, like in the near term, that doesn't do you out there who doesn't have a Janie down the street. I think that you've got to lean on artists. You've got to, like, when it comes to CHP not answering the call, that's unacceptable. But Ken, are there other, beyond just the 911 call, what else does a homeowner or resident, I'm reading from Mark about an issue in Sepulveda Basin being attacked. What advice?
I mean, if you didn't call, I'd call 211. Okay, 911 is emergencies for the police, but 211 is Health and Human Services. And you're going to get someone that's going to pick up on that. And when they do, you know, you can say, listen, I've got someone that looks like they're homeless. It looks like they're out of it. It looks like, you know, they're going to be a danger to themselves or someone else. There are multidisciplinary teams that will be sent out to address that situation.
Thank you.
So call 211, okay? And if you, my email address, hopefully we can put that up there. It's ken.thevalley.org. Or honestly, you can just call me on my cell. I don't care. It's 805-279-3055. And when you have those instances, if you can't get through to you will get through to 211, and they should be able to help you. But if not, you know, I can at least then direct you to, you know, who's heading up some of those multidisciplinary teams, in which then you have a social worker going out there, you have a homeless service provider, an outreach worker. So you have these teams that will go out and address that situation, and not necessarily, if they're breaking the law, yes, you're going to have to deal with, you know, then call, you know, 911. But if it's a situation like that, I would have called 211.
Thank you so much. Real quick, and then I'll get to my question.
Yeah, please.
There's an issue that's affecting everybody. The #1 killer in the world that's killing us right now in Encino are mosquitoes. We have a serious issue.
And some of you may be smiling or think, you know, mosquitoes, really, Janie, I've lost very, very close friends to West Nile virus. I'm talking about LA residents, people who actually live in our community. Went to, my friend's mom's funeral because of a mosquito, because of a jacuzzi next door that the homeowner hadn't been maintaining and became a breeding ground. We are going, because of climate change and our warmer winters, the eggs are not getting frozen like they need to be and killed off, and they're gonna get worse and worse. And so what I'm actually working on a bill there. I don't want to say it for every single issue, but I am. There's a thing called vector control districts. There are mosquito vector control regions. And I think I just saw my niece get assaulted last week. She was all along her neck and on her ankles and on her legs and on her body. She's like, whatever, 8 years old. It scared me so much because it's not just like, oh, it's a mosquito bite. That's whatever, just put some, calamine lotion on it and shake it off. If West Nile's carried there, you're actually lose your life. I'd like to see the Encino-Tarzana region, really from the Sepulveda Basin and then north from there, establish its own mosquito vector control district, and then go do applied treatments. So where we're handling on public lands, we need to do targeted abatement, which sometimes can be targeted spraying, but we're not talking about like do a flyover crop dusting. We're talking about like they have very sophisticated drone technology that can actually find these nesting grounds and knock them out in targeted ways that doesn't hurt any other wildlife. But also, we're going to need to run a campaign with this district and get homeowners with pools, because you all know them, they're all in your neighborhoods, they cannot abandon those pools and leave them open and breeding. So we're going to have to start putting, I think, some fines in place, frankly, for people who aren't doing that. Abandoned houses are a big problem in that way. So maybe that's a good topic for another community forum. And maybe we can circle up some of the state experts and start to make our case, because I think people are going to get hurt. And they already are. So thanks for bringing that up. And if you guys want to make that we can do some more of these kind of meetings and maybe, piece a few other parts of our region together and start to lean on folks. So I'm getting
here's my question. So my question is, what will you do to continue to support businesses with everything that's happening right now?
Yeah, it's a very it's an apocalyptic time especially to do retail and the service industry. I mean, I've got, we've been trying to do what we can, cobbling together fundraising drives and, keeping restaurants open. But frankly, we've got to beat this COVID, right? Like, and this shutdown is decimating for not just our schools, but for the small businesses out there. We did a major small business tax relief and tax incentive for those hit directly by COVID. There's I think $50 million targeted for our region to go out and help get grants to some of these businesses that have not been able to get that PPP loan, right? Or some of the stuff that the big boys got. But the fact is that we are going to lose a lot of, especially those small businesses. And it's very easy. I love my Amazon. It's so convenient, but like that is going to eat up mom and pops throughout our region. So the between that and, Uber Eats and all the rest of it, you've got to help us find some way to push back on the full Amazon takeover of the business sector in our region and find ways to shop locally. We're going to do somewhat of what we can with small business relief and throw a little bit of money at it, but money's not going to solve this problem. I think if we can beat back this virus through this fall and actually go pray for this vaccination and don't fear the mask and don't politicize it and don't let that become like I don't care. Like, I have so many Republican friends. I don't care. And like, if you didn't vote for me, it's okay. I'm still going to work for you. And I still love you. I mean that genuinely. But let's not make like protecting your neighbors and your family members with that mask and with ways to be considerate and do what you can to prevent the spread. Let's not make that a political thing. Somehow we've got to beat that back. So we got to beat COVID. We're going to have to do a major stimulus effort. And I'm going to be introducing a major infrastructure and local business reinvestment bond next session to hopefully get some public works going in our region, for instance, to help Sepulveda Basin get back on track and improve the LA River and put people back to work. But some of this is just going to have to be citizen action and really going down the block and, making that extra effort. I know the click is so easy, but like making that extra effort and leaning on that small business locally is a big way to do it too. So it's not an easy time, especially for small businesses. And I know that's probably an unsatisfying answer, but I don't know. I don't know what the future of Ventura Boulevard is going to look like. I don't know what our little diners are, what's going to happen to them. I don't know what a little hardware store is going to do. I don't know what a little dressmaker is going to do. It is not an easy time, but if you know folks who are hurting out there, let us know. And we've got this grant program. At least that'll help get them through it. Even the small landlords out there, we put a lot of tenant relief in place, but the landlords don't have the same back end. They still got to pay the mortgage. So they're still up against it, especially the small ones. So you're right to ask the question, and I wish I had better answers for you, but we're going to try to, muscle.
By the way, you guys, I was just reading on the chat. It turns out that there's a certain kind of mosquito that seems to survive on that lettuce.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So then doubly, so that's exactly what, if we had a mosquito vector control district, we would be able to go deal with that and not rely on volunteers. But right now, Encino, we got to just kind of like pull together and go do the work, right? And so again, I wasn't saying go make a salad earlier, just to be clear. Gather the lettuce, put it to the side, and then City Parks and Rec will clean it up. But I would love to see that positive action coming out of this little forum, those little acts. I'll go post my my lettuce removal pick in the next few days here, but I want to see your guys too. Janie, by the way, thank you I know we're going to have a separate forum and really bring Caltrans in to try to turn the page on this bridge conversation. And Claudia, you've got an equity stake in this too, but just so I'm on the record and you guys know it in a public forum, I think there's a better way than just straight rebuilding that pedestrian bridge and spending, tens of millions of dollars on it. I think if we really focus on improving Louise, take that bridge down and beautify that community and get parents who are commuting to school and the Amistoy community and the folks on the other side of the freeway to all love Louise and make Amistoy beautiful. I'm going to find the money to fix those sidewalks, to help get some street lights. I'm going to try to get Paul Koretz's help too, and I think he's going to get there. And hopefully we can really embrace, to me, what's a better way to move ourselves and make Encino a more walkable and safer area, which is on the broken sidewalks going over Louise, where it's a huge ramp to get up over that. You basically trip and fall. There's no street lights at all. It's ugly, no offense. I love Louise as you go further up the hill, but we've got to fix that. So to be continued, but I just want you to know, Janie and Rob and all the rest of the residents in the area have been advocating and frustrated and feeling like Caltrans isn't hearing you. Do not give up hope. They are hearing you. I'm making sure they hear you, and we're going to turn the page there and really provide a better solution than just throwing money at a problem that I think there's a much better way to solve. I know. Let me make sure so I don't leave anybody hanging here. Jonathan had a couple more questions. Pat, I know you were going to ask about getting more funding to restore wildlife habitat. We also talked about park ranger presence. I do want to touch that one. Let me just look in the chat room, just make sure I don't leave anybody hanging before we go win game 4. Yeah, Pat, you're being eaten alive. The streets don't drain. People flood the streets. There's sprinklers. Exactly. Yes, we do love Louise, Alyssa. Down with the lettuce. Amen, Judith. Let me just check our Facebook chat real quick. I don't remember SB 145. I got to look that up, Scott. I'm sorry. I got to figure that vote out. Okay, it looks like we've covered most of the ground here. Bruce Klein, by the way, thank you for your comment about 474. If you guys want to do another forum on sort of wildfire housing issues, let's do a whole breakout group and try to unite the Valley and our region a little bit, and even through that 405 corridor. And stay tuned, we are going to have this homeowner's guide to hardening your home on October 12th, and then another one on the 19th, and how you can actually volunteer to help make that happen. So stay tuned there. And Pat, to your question about wildlife habitat in the basin, I had a big wildlife funding measure pending in the legislature this year, and COVID knocked it out completely. And people decided that, the legislature is funny, right? Because everyone during COVID was hungrier than ever for getting outdoors and getting like convening with nature. And yet they said, you know what? We're not going to give that opportunity to the voters, and we're going to just kick that to next year. I'm still frustrated that failed, but part of the bond that I was just talking about that also dealt with Janie's local businesses, we're going to try to restore both our built infrastructure, right, by making our streets safer, by investing in smaller grids and renewable energy, but also by investing in natural infrastructure to capture stormwater, to restore habitat. And so if we think about it as sort of an infrastructure plan to make us resilient against this era of climate change and all the pressures that we've got, and improve our streets at the same time, and improve our communities at the same time, I think we can actually architect a really exciting economic recovery that can start right here in the Valley. So stay tuned on that. I haven't fully written it. I was working on the outline today and trying to get the coalitions ready, but I'm going to need your help. And what it would be is it'd go to the voters in 22. And in the meantime, we'll fight for funding in this budget cycle. So if you have issues, I'll go to the mat for you. I promise you that. Thanks, Keith, for tuning in, and Narit. I'm going to let everyone go. You guys have been troopers for hanging on so long. Janie even had time to tattoo I voted, I think, onto her left arm, which is impressive. I don't know how you pulled that off. But Muriel, Alex, you guys want to just any closeout remarks? Alex, you were really the impetus for a lot of this, and Claudia, thanks again for joining. But Alex, do you want to get just one last word in before we wrap up?
You give me a platform, I can talk for hours, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who decided to stay on and not go watch the Lakers or the Dodgers. Thank you to Pat and Muriel, Claudia, Janie, who has worked so hard on so many issues in Encino. It's my pleasure to be surrounded by so many people who are interested in their community and want to make a difference and see a change. One thing I don't think we brought up, I think it's important to at least get the word out there, is that Encino is going to be up to be redistricted, which means we may not be part of CD5. And we at the Neighborhood Council are going to start a discussion on that, hopefully at our next general board meeting. Because I think it's important that we, the community, have a say in where we'd like to be. Which changes my whole outlook moving forward as to what I was going to do. But for those who don't know, my intent still is to run for CD5, but if it's not going to be part of it, I rather focus my energy on Encino and what we can do to keep this community growing and just what I've always known to be home. And I look forward to working with everyone. We will start that the lettuce challenge, I guess we can call it. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, it can go viral. So many other challenges go viral. Let's make the lettuce challenge go viral.
Let's do it. That's the hashtag. All right.
Hashtag lettuce challenge.
Right, good.
And I'll get out there with some old tennis rackets that I have that I don't use anymore, and we'll just start scooping up that lettuce.
Listen, Narit already went and removed lettuce while we were on this call, and A rake works best. So you guys were somebody already went and did it.
Oh,
Wow.
and Nurit's like head of sustainability at like UCLA. She's a bigwig. So if Nurit can do it, you can do it.
Okay.
Yep. So let's all do this again. Thank you. Anything that comes up, any questions that you want to know more about the neighborhood council, important issues that we're taking up, or issues you want us to take up, email me, president@encinonc.org. It's pretty simple, but please get involved. And again, vote, 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 vote. I can't stress that enough. There was a question about health and equity. So whoever asked that question, I'll be more than happy to address it, because I don't know if it was related to COVID or just health equity in general, or even health equality, something that we should all be discussing as well. But any questions and weren't answered, please send them my way. And I always make myself available. So thank you, Senator Stern. Claudia, we're going to be in touch to be talking soon. Thank you, Janie. Muriel, Pat, we're going to be out there collecting lettuce.
All right, you guys. Hey, well, listen, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, Jeremy and Denise are our eyes and ears on the ground, but I will post my email as well here, just so you guys have it. This isn't filtered. I stay up way too late. And I don't think my wife knew what she bought into when she married me last November. She's like, "This is your job?" But I love working for you. So bless you all for being civic leaders all in your own right. And yeah, hang in there. If there's stuff we didn't cover, if you want to drill down, we'll do a mosquito town hall. We'll dig into that. If you guys want to talk about, Claudia, you want to go talk about distance learning challenges and put some other education leaders together, let's do that. We can go specifically at Sepulveda Basin. I'm game to dig in here. So just know you don't pay us a lot of money, and you certainly don't pay Jeremy and Denise enough, or Megan, but we're gonna work our tails off for you. So we love you, and please be good to each other, and let's make Encino beautiful. I know we can get there, and the leaders on this call, I see a bright future in a very dark time. All right, guys, take care out there.
Thank you.
Bye.